68. My name is Rob Dauster. I have Jeff Goodman today. And Jeff broke a little bit of news. Goodman, I'll just turn the floor over to you and allow you to talk to the people about what happened today.
Yeah, Chris Holtman has been fired by Ohio State. Gene Smith called him into his office this morning around 11 o'clock, maybe 10:30 Eastern time, and decided to part ways with Holtman in the midst of a second straight season in which they started really well and then have really kind of floundered. And last year, if you remember, I think they started like 12-2, lost 14 of 15. This year started well again and have lost 8 of their last 10. According to my sources, Gene Smith told them about a week ago that he was good for the rest of the season, but he had to make the NCAA tournament. And now, after last night's loss at Wisconsin, things change quickly. And again, listen, here, my deal on this, Rob, is you can make the move, but I would have let it go till the end of the season. It's not like Chris Holtman is this guy who's not done anything for the program. He went to the tournament. He was set to go to the tournament 5 of his first 5 years. And they've been bad the second half the last 2 years. Bad. So if you want to make a move, Gene Smith. But to make a move with whatever it is, 7-8 games left in the season, with a guy who's at least handled himself the right way on and off the court throughout his tenure, I think is bullshit. Personally, I do.
The struggles down the stretch of the season have been something that we've talked about quite a bit on the field of 68, and it's something that's probably gotten the most attention when it comes to talking about Holtman's tenure at Ohio State. I think it was 14 out of 15 they lost last year after a good start to the season, and this year they were 12-2, crept up to the top 25, lost 3 in a row. That turned into 8 out of 9. That turned into 9 out of 11 after losing to Wisconsin last night in Madison. The question that I have is how much of this is motivated by trying to secure NIL, trying to ensure that you don't lose players to the portal in an era where there is immediate eligibility for transfers? How much of this is trying to make sure that those people that need to open up those checkbooks to be able to kind of make sure that you have the money to spend when the portal opens up in less than a month now? How much of that is a factor here?
I think for Gene, remember, Gene's retiring, Gene Smith, and this was his decision. This wasn't Ross Bjork's decision, who's coming in from Texas A&M. This was Gene Smith's probably last act here as AD of Ohio State before he retires. And, maybe it's his way of trying to get ahead of it at this point and be able to make calls. I would have just said to Holtman, hey, listen, we're going to part ways with you at the end of the year, just so you know, do you want to finish out the year or not? I'm going to give you that ability. If you want to finish out the year, you can, but we're going to start to look for a replacement for you. So if you hear about me making calls, I'm going to start to make some calls. The question's going to be also, Rob, like, obviously Ohio State is a program a lot of people are going to want, but now you're fighting with Louisville most likely because Louisville's going to make a move on Kenny Payne at the end of the year. So those two. And which job would you rather have? Well, it probably does come down a lot to NIL. And I'm told both NIL aren't nearly as good as what they should be or what you thought they'd be. The other thing with Gene Smith and Holtman was they had kind of mutually agreed in a way to go young, to not necessarily load up with transfers before the season. And Holtman brought in another pretty good class, of which sources close to him told me he regrets doing, that he would have went the portal route a lot harder than he did, but he built one class last year and then had another pretty good recruiting class, of which these freshmen just didn't play. I mean, they didn't, and if they did, they didn't make an impact this year. So, that's probably something that Holtman would have liked to have had back on that decision. But again, from what I was told, he and Gene were kind of in lockstep there.
Yeah. I will say that when you have Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale and Jamison Battle, I think that there is enough there to be able to win more. I understand that the frustration that would be there because of the start.
Listen, I'm not saying I'm not defending
no, I know, I get it.
fire Chris
I'm just,
Holtman
yeah,
at the
no,
end of the year. I don't think it should have been done today. Is my biggest issue. Is you could still handle it the right way if you're Gene Smith with a guy who I think has handled himself the right way and had plenty of success. Remember when he took over? There's a reason they fired Thad Matta in June,
mhm.
right? Chris Holtman took over and got that program back pretty quickly. Did he ever get it back to what Ohio State fans wanted? Hell no. He didn't get it past the first weekend. I get that. Like, obviously, you're Ohio State. You're not good with just getting knocked out in the first weekend every year. I understand that. Now you're not even getting in the last 2 years. So again, I'm not defending the decision to make the move on him. I'm defending how he made the move on him.
Yeah. All right. So you've just been fired by the field of 68. You've now been hired instead of Ross Bjork to be the AD at Ohio State. You are now finding the replacement for Chris Holtman for a job that is one of the better jobs that I think people don't realize is a really good job. Who are you calling? Who are you reaching out to? Who is your kind of dream appointment in this spot? I'll just tell you right off the bat,
One
if
name.
I'm Gene Smith, the first person that I'm going to is I'm driving down to Cincinnati. I'm driving to the Cintas Center. And I'm going after Sean Miller
Agreed.
first, second, third, fourth. I'm going to
Now,
make him say no to me.
yeah,
First.
he's number one. He is
Mhm.
number one. Here's the issue. Like Nate Oates' buyout is too much money. Okay, so even if you want Nate Oates, you're probably not going to pay 12 million, whatever his buyout, 14 million. TJ Otzelberger's buyout is in the same range, maybe even a little bit higher. So you could probably take those two out of the conversation right now. Greg McDermott's name's going to be brought up. I'm just not sure I would hire Greg McDermott at this point in his career, to be honest. I think he probably goes to warmer weather if he leaves Creighton to go anywhere else. Dusty May's a name that'll be thrown around. Don't hate it, but again, he'd be behind Sean Miller. Lamont Paris is an interesting name, Rob,
Mhm.
because of what he's done this year at South Carolina, and he's got Midwest ties from being an assistant at Wisconsin when they were rolling years ago under Kaminsky and Decker and some of those guys. But again, to me,
Hey, look, I'll tell you this
oh,
too about Lamont. I just talked with T.O. and Fanta about this. There's no one that coaches a more Big Ten style than Lamont Paris does. Like if you hire him in the Big
sure.
Ten, they're just going to play boring, grind you down, tough physical defense, good guards, get him a big body and try to play it, 55 possessions. He is a Big Ten coach through and through.
Yeah, I mean, I just think Sean's the easy pick here. If
Mhm.
the buyout is affordable, then I think it's the fairly easy pick to at least go after him. Now, again, if you're Sean Miller, are you saying is it worth it? What's your NIL? Because that's the key, right? Like Xavier's got really good NIL right now, really good. Now, a lot of Big East schools do, top of the Big East. My bet is Xavier had more money for NIL this year than Ohio State did. Like I would be very, very confident saying that. So, again, if you're Sean Miller, is it worth making this move? Is it worth it? You're in the Big East. You don't have football there. You don't have to worry about football there, taking a lot of that NIL money, which is kind of what's happened so far at Ohio State. Obviously, football was behind a little bit. My guess is they've caught up. Can Ohio State back? And the other part, listen, here's the other part to this that people don't talk about. While Ohio State is a great job, you know what it doesn't have that almost every other Big Ten program has in basketball?
What's that?
A home court advantage, a legitimate home court advantage. They just don't. I've been to games there in non-conference, and unless it's a big, big, big game, they don't really give a shit at that point because they're into football. Where, again, Xavier, all year, you know what the Cintas Center is like
Oh yeah.
every game, every game. And all those other schools, Michigan State, you go down the list of the Big Ten, Indiana, Illinois, they are rabid college basketball fans. And Ohio State, it's one of the worst. To me, it's one of the worst jobs. Now, again, if you get it going, you bring in Greg Oden and Mike Conley and Daquan Cook and those guys, it's a little bit different. But it's also harder to bring. Whoever takes over is not bringing in those dudes again. That was a one-time deal with Thad Matta in Ohio State.
Yeah. Any off the radar names? There's going to be some that float around for every single big job that opens, and that's like the Mick Cronins of the world. You mentioned Dusty
Well,
May.
his
You men-
buyout's too big.
yeah, you mentioned Sean Miller. You mentioned McDermott. Like, there's going to be names that pop up for every single job. Is there anything outside the box that you think people aren't talking about, or anybody that you would at least like kick the tires on?
Um, I don't know. I'm trying to think of who else is hot enough right now that fits. I think they're going to want somebody with a little more fire than Holtman had, and that's where Sean Miller fits, right?
Mhm.
What you ordinarily want is what you didn't have before, and Holtman was pretty even keel. Not he had gotten fiery a little bit, but I'm trying to think of who else you could
It's
go.
hard. Like the obvious hire, it's just so obvious to go after Sean Miller. It makes too much sense. And uh the
There
if
just
you
aren't a lot
are,
of movable guys. When you look at the best guys in the country right now, how many of them are really movable? Very, very few.
that's why you
They
get
have,
those huge buyouts. That's
they
why
have
ADs
huge
go and get those huge
buyouts.
buyouts.
Right. They either have huge buyouts or they're in places that they're comfortable
Yep.
and they're not leaving big
Hey,
salaries.
Jeff, can I tell you my conspiracy theory? Here's my
But
conspiracy theory. The entire reason that all of these conference commissioners and all of these ADs wanted to expand the NCAA tournament and kick out the mid majors to be able to make more money for themselves is because they realize that the buyouts that they've signed are too high. So they want to be able to spend $30 million to get a guy into their program instead of just spending $10 million. Listen, this has been the Field of 68, breaking down Ohio State's decision to part ways with Chris Holtman. We'll have more of this tonight. Field of 68 after dark, 11 o'clock. That'll be me again with Chris Mack and Randolph Childress. So that'll be an
hey, can't
interesting
wait to hear
conversation.
Max
I
Max
know.
comments on that. Make sure you watch that tonight because maybe Mac will throw his name in the ring for Ohio State there.
Hey, Chris Mack, are you interested in the Ohio State job? Have you had your agent reach out yet? Oh, you have. Interesting. There's a fun conversation to have. Listen, this has been the Field of 68.